Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we're going to open with a brief County Commissioners meeting. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will call to order the Nantucket County Commissioners meeting for June 26, 2024 at 5:33 p.m. Our first order of business is announcements, and the first one is County Commission meeting is being audio and video recorded. The next item on the agenda is public comment for any business or any public comment for items not on our agenda. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak? For county commissioners? Carolyn? No? Okay. Seeing none online, move on to our next. There's no new business that I'm aware of. Erica? No? And then item 5 is approval of minutes and warrants. I would entertain a motion to approve both. Thank you. Moved by Malcolm, seconded by Matt. By roll call, Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Dr. McNabb.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Dawn Holgate.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Those are approved. Thank you. Official businesses and requests. There aren't any for this monthly meeting. And our next order of business is commissioners' reports, comments, and this item is our 2024-25 appointment of county representative to Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission. And is there a motion to make a nomination for county representative on the NP and EDC?
Yes, Brooke Moore.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Moved by Dawn, seconded by Matt. By roll call, Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Dr. McNabb.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Dawn Holgate.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Brooks, seconded by Matt. By roll call, Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Dr. McNabb.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Dawn Holgate.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Pass it over to the chair of the select board. Thank you.
So I will call to order the meeting of the Select Board for June 26th, 2025 at 5:34 p.m. We will accept the agenda as written. I just want to make a couple comments for people who are here for items later on the agenda. We will not be taking public comment on either the Concom regulations or the warrant adoption. And I just wanted to give a reasoning for that. Both of these have public hearings as part of the process. The Conservation Commission will be having their public hearing tomorrow evening on the Concom regulations. We have just asked that they be presented to us in advance of that hearing so that we can see them. And then for the short-term rental, the board is going to discuss whether to adopt the warrant in whole with the proposed compromise article, and there will be public hearings at both the Planning Board and Finance Committee in the normal town meeting process, so there will be ample opportunity for the community to comment. We will be taking statements from the article proponents during that, but no other public comment. So just that clarification. Libby, other announcements?
This meeting is being video and audio recorded. There is no select board meeting next Wednesday, July 3rd. We're on the board summer schedule. And the board's next meeting will be Wednesday, July 10th. Town offices will be closed next Thursday, July 4th, in observance of Independence Day. We are still putting out there a plea, I guess, a call to the public to help seek an exemption for Nantucket Sound from the North Atlantic right whale vessel speed reductions. So I don't know if you want to maybe mention this later about our consultation. that we had today, but we believe it is still needed. There may be some legislative action or other efforts underway to get an exemption for Nantucket Sound, but it doesn't hurt to keep up the pressure. And I believe the housing director is going to make the next announcement, if Christie's online.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to make a quick announcement to the community that the Affordable Homes Act is making its way through the legislative process and is now being taken up in the Senate. While the initial Senate bill did not include a local option for a real estate transfer fee, we are encouraging community members, both year-round and seasonal, to reach out to senators to voice their support of both a transfer fee and a seasonal communities designation. Both of these will provide really great opportunities for the community in terms of supporting affordable housing. And our community desperately needs this funding sources. We're also encouraging seasonal residents of Massachusetts to reach out to their Senate representatives to encourage them to support an island pilot amendment, which has been proposed, which would allow Nantucket and Dukes County to establish a transfer fee. We have an email template on the housing website, and it's also on the link on the agenda for tonight's meeting that gives you the template and where to send your testimony. And they are taking it up tomorrow, but we just encourage you at any point over the next couple of days to either call or email into our state senators and the Senate president. So thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Select board announcements and comments?
Madam Chair, just have a quick one from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Want to thank Rima Sherry for all her work over the years. She is not applying for reappointment this year. We have appointments done, obviously, and she did yeoman's effort in the affordable housing sphere. So good job, Rima. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Anybody else? I'm just going to opine a little bit on the process that we're doing along with this, trying to get the exemption for Nantucket Sound. We are in touch with other constituencies, both regionally and nationally, in trying to keep this from happening, either by us getting an exemption or by postponing indefinitely the regulations themselves. There are a number of different efforts from a number of different constituencies, and we're sort of analyzing who it makes sense for us to align with. But our first line of defense is this request for the exemption. And today, I testified for the second time with the Office of Management and Budget, along with Police Chief, Fire Chief, and the DPW Director. And they did a really good job of identifying the critical issues of a loss of our fast ferry service half of the year or all year, depending on the economics of that, and a reduction of our freight boats, our slow boats by 1/3, which is, what the impact of these regulations would be. So, and the flip side of that is there have been 0 sightings of North Atlantic right whales in these ferry paths ever. So, the benefit is 0 and the cost could be astronomical. So please take a few minutes to write or call. As indicated, you can find it on the website, so I'll just reiterate that. The other thing I wanted to say is town meeting did pass a resolution, a non-binding resolution with regard to a review of the investigation of the African Meeting House incident. I wanted to let everyone know that there is work in progress on that, and we will have more to announce on or before the July 17th meeting as to what steps town administration will be taking with regard to that. I just didn't want to leave people hanging. So with that, we don't have any follow-up comments from prior select board meetings. Now is the opportunity for public comment for items not on the agenda. If you'd like to come forward to the mic or raise your hand online. Caroline, if you want to go first, and then I'll go to Campbell Sutton and Megan Perry online.
Thank you. Caroline Baltzer, member of the Town Council Study Committee. And I'd like to raise my concern at the process of the Select Board, the decision to severely restrict public comment on a recent issue. We were just, in our Town Council Study Committee from today, I missed you, Tom, We had heard that from the Collins Center, that it is very important for us to incorporate public comment right along the way because, as they noted, some of our proposals will be impacted by that public comment, and that is part of the legislative democratic process. And we're taking that to heart. And it does slow things down, and people are worried about our going too slowly, but it is necessary, especially in the open town meeting form of government. So for me to have watched the last meetings on the topic at hand, the short-term rental article, for the select board possibly to get ready to sponsor an article with what I regard as not enough input, and the way that it has been handled seems, my impression is that it feels disrespectful, and I'm sure that you do not intend that, but that's how it is coming across to many people. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Megan Perry? Erica online?
Thanks.
There we go. Okay. Go ahead, Megan.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. I wanted to thank the Select Board and the Board of Health for the joint meeting last night. I thought it was wonderful for you to do, and I hope that those continue and they continue to be open to the public and allow for public comment. I did have a question I forgot to ask last night, and I figured I would just ask it before I forgot and before time went by, because I think the last update was in May of 2023 regarding this. Do you happen to know or recall, or could you look into how much funding is set aside for PFAS and PFAS matters for the future? I know numbers were talked about how much has been spent already, but I'm just curious if the town has started to examine how much will be needed potentially for the future. And I just didn't get a chance to ask that with my 3-minute limitation last night. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Campbell Sutton?
Good evening, all. I just had a thanks for being there tonight, and I wasn't able to make it, so I'm on Zoom, which seems to be going in and out. So I hope it doesn't go out right now. I just had a couple of quick comments. One regarding the of roads that is on the town's website. And I'm just wondering if that could be updated. It says, you know, what roads are private, what are public, what are, you know, dirt trails, that kind of thing. But it still has Appleton Road as a private road, which it was in the 90s when this was taken over or given to the town. I don't know how you want to call that. So it is a public road, and this is coming as from my comments on, you know, trying to have cars park not on the side or with one tire in the road along our busy roadways. And when I went to look, I noticed a couple of roads that are public are listed as, you know, on the map as private. So I don't know who to go to for that, but that would be great. I think it would also help in planning to ensure that public roads and private ways are better defined. The other comment also has to do with the website. I've been trying, as many of you know, I go to a number of meetings and I try to get the agenda to sign up. And what I've noticed is, you know, you go to the agendas icon on a town website, and then it loads and you get select a category. Well, for about the last 2 weeks, no matter what device I use, I select a category and then try to uncheck them all, you know, with all categories, and uncheck that, and the whole thing, the list just disappears. So you have to go through the entire thing to get to where you're going. And because it hasn't been fixed, as I noticed tonight, I thought I would mention it in case there's something that someone can do to fix that issue.
Okay, normally I don't respond. Campbell, could you email the roads that you are questioning to Erica, and also just shoot an email to Erica about the website situation as well? That would be great.
I'll give that a try.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else, public comment for items not on the agenda? Seeing no one else online. We don't have any new business. Next up is approval of minutes, warrants, Treasury warrant, payroll and Treasury warrants, and pending contracts. Do we want to take them all together, or are there any questions?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, so that's approval of all four, 1 through 4, by Matt,
Aye.
Malcolm,
Aye.
Dawn,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So those are approved unanimously. Okay, we're going to move into annual Select Board Committee appointments. So Erica, do you want to review which ones are not contested? And I have it, I could do it, or you could do it. You want me to do it?
No, I'm happy to do it
Okay,
if you want.
great.
And I was just going to note too, do you want me to review the process as well? How
Sure,
we're going to do it?
that would be great.
So when we do get to the voting, the select board members who are physically present will be voting by paper ballot. And I'm going to ask Dawn to text me because I don't have access to email here tonight.
Okay, I'll text you.
So, and I will read everybody's votes, and we will tally them and go from there. So for the non-contested votes, it would be the Agricultural Commission, Posey Constable. Board of Health, you have 3 applicants, but we have gotten an opinion from Town Council because the Board of Health, the act that established a separate Board of Health from the Select Board, actually has a residency requirement. It was pointed out to me, and I had missed that. So I got an opinion from Town Council about what does residency mean, and we, the response was they were not, they kind of urged you not to appoint a seasonal resident. Usually a resident in this manner is meant somebody who lives here permanently. So unfortunately, both John Katz and Robert Goldzer indicated that they were seasonal residents. So I'm going to ask you to appoint Jim Cooper by acclamation for the Board of Health.
And I just want to state, this is for the Board of Health. And we do appreciate participation from seasonal residents and other things, so long as we have this hybrid option, it's available. So, but this is unique to the Board of Health at this
Correct.
point.
It was, I think it was Article 46 of the Acts of 2010 that established this. So Capital Program Committee, you're not going to be voting on that. There were no applicants. We will re-advertise that. Cemetery Commission, Francis Cartoonan and Lee Saperstein will both be appointed. Contract Review Subcommittee, Human Services, John Balash. Council for Human Services, Sue Minton and Veronica Bolchek. Council for Human Services, Linda Williams and Lisa Sherburne. Cultural Council, Tony Wagner. Historic District Commission Associate, Carrie Thornwell. Nantucket Historical Commission, Angus McLeod. Real Estate Assessment Committee, John Brescher. Roads and Right-of-Way Committee, Nelson Eldridge, Rob Ranney, and Ed Gillum. Scholarship Committee will have to re-advertise. There were no applicants for that. Tree Advisory Committee, Ben Shampoo and Emily Molden. Zoning Board of Appeals, John Brescher. Zoning Board of Appeals alternate, Lisa Botticelli. So if somebody wants to make a motion to appoint them all by acclamation.
So moved?
And I just want to clarify, I think you said Council for Human Services twice. The second one should have been Council on Aging.
Thank you.
Just so that
I appreciate that.
people know what they're being appointed to. So a motion to appoint by acclamation from Matt, a second.
Second.
Okay, by roll call, Matt Fee.
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb.
Aye.
Don Holgate.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
And myself. Congratulations and thank you for applying to all those who were appointed. And now we'll go into the contested.
Yes, so the first up is going to be the Airport Commission. You have 2 seats available and 3 applicants. Philip Marks, Andrea Planzer, and Michael Levitt. So please write down your votes for 2 applicants, and Dawn, please text me.
And I also want to note, it says Andrea's a new applicant, but
Yes,
she's.
that was an error, a
Yeah,
typo.
and
She's an incumbent.
incumbent, so.
I have more of these too, if you guys need more. So Don, I'm going to ask you to confirm your vote for Phil Marks and Andrea Planzer.
Correct.
And the chair, Mr. Dixon, Mr. Fee, and Dr. McNabb also all voted for Philip Marks and Andrea Planzer, so it was unanimous. Next up is Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. You have 1 seat available and 2 applicants, Sarah Boyes and Shelley Lockwood. Okay, Dawn, your vote was for Sarah Boyes,
Correct.
and that was actually a unanimous vote. Everybody voted for Sarah. Next is the Conservation Commission. You're going to be voting for 2 applicants. You have three names in: Linda Williams, Ian Golding, and John Schaefer. Okay, so Dawn, I have you voting for Linda Williams and John Schaefer.
Correct.
The chair voted for Linda Williams and John Schaefer. Mr. Dixon voted for Linda Williams and John Schaefer. Mr. V voted for Linda Williams and Ian Golding. Dr. McNabb voted for Ian Golding and John Schaefer. So that will give Linda Williams 4 votes, Ian Golding 2 votes, and John Schaefer 4 votes. So Linda Williams and John Schaefer have been appointed. Next is the Finance Committee. You are going to be putting 3 names in. There are 4 applicants: Joseph Wright, Peter Schaefer, Jeremy Bloomer, and Kathleen Richen. And you don't need to fold them. You can just
All right.
pass them around.
Yeah. I don't want anyone to cheat.
Okay, so Don voted for Joseph Wright, Peter Schaefer, and Jeremy Bloomer. The chair voted for Joseph Wright, Peter Schaefer, Jeremy Bloomer. Mr. Dixon, Joseph Wright, Peter Schaefer, Jeremy Bloomer. Mr. Fee, Peter Schaefer, Jeremy Bloomer, Kathleen Richen. Dr. McNabb, Joseph Wright, Peter Schaefer, and Kathleen Richen. So that gives 4 votes to Joseph Wright, 5 votes to Peter Schaefer, 4 votes to Jeremy Bloomer, and 2 votes for Kathleen Richen. So that gives Joe Wright, Peter Schaefer, and Jeremy Bloomer as appointed. Next is the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust. You have 3 seats available. 1 seat is supposed to be a realtor, and the other 2 are at large. And your applicants are Brian Sullivan, who is a realtor, Chantal Blois Murphy, Boyd Bogus, Kim McMahon, and Forrest Bell. Okay, so Don, just confirm your votes are for Brian Sullivan, Chantal Blois Murphy, and Forrest Bell.
Correct.
The chair voted for Brian Sullivan, Chantal Blois Murphy, and Boyd Bogus. Mr. Dixon voted for Brian Sullivan, Chantal Blois Murphy, and Forrest Bell. Mr. Fee voted for Brian Sullivan, Chantal Blois Murphy, and Boyd Bogus. Dr. McNabb voted for Brian Sullivan, Chantal Blois Murphy, and Forrest Bell. That gives Brian Sullivan unanimous with 5 votes, Chantal Blois Murphy unanimous with 5 votes, Boyd Bogus with 2 votes, and Forrest Bell with 3 votes. So it's going to be Brian, Chantal, and Forrest. And lastly, you have Planning Board alternate. You have 1 seat that you need to make the appointment for and 2 applicants, Liza Hatton and Howard Matz. Thank you. Dawn voted for Liza Hatton.
Correct.
The chair voted for Liza Hatton. Mr. Dixon, Mr. Fee, and Dr. McNabb all voted for Howard Matz. So that's a 3-2 vote for Howard Matz. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who applied, and congratulations to the people who've been appointed tonight. We really appreciate people's willingness to serve in helping run our government. There will be another round of applications that Erica will be advertising when?
Now that you've made all the appointments, I'll call up a new list, and it depends on the meeting schedule and our appointment
Yeah.
protocol,
So as soon as we can
As soon as we can.
appropriately advertise and schedule
I mean,
it.
it would be great to get it in before the end of July, but it might be early August.
Okay, great. And encourage everybody to keep an eye on available seats, and please volunteer to help serve in government. It's very rewarding, and it makes your voice heard. So thanks, everybody. Okay, back to the agenda. Okay, Citizen Departmental Committee requests. Mariah Mitchell Association request for waiver of town noise bylaw. Who's presenting?
I can just give you some background.
Sure.
But I know Joanna Roach from the Mariah Mitchell Association is also here. At your May 13th meeting, I believe it was, you heard a public assembly permit for the Mariah Mitchell Association for their annual Stargazer fundraiser. That was approved. Part of the request was a waiver of the noise bylaw, which has to come here to a Wednesday night because it's a different matter, so, our policy matter. So the waiver is before you for a half an hour past the time the noise bylaw kicks in. And like I said, Joanna's here if you have any questions.
Are there any questions from the board? No one here to speak on the matter? Joanna, we'll save your time, I think. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, by roll call, Malcolm,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Matt,
Aye.
and Tom.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thanks for coming. Okay, next up is a request for waiver of the town noise bylaw from July 2nd, 2024 at 10 PM to July 3rd, 2024 at 2 AM on Federal Street for splicing of a fiber-optic cable. Erica, you want to present this to us?
Sure. So anytime that there's work after 10 PM, especially any kind of utility work, we ask that it come before the board to make the decision whether or not they want to allow that. Obviously, we know it's in the middle of the summer. Doing this kind of utility work on Federal Street during the day would be a little bit tough. So it's your pleasure. Ben Bryant from RW Bryant is here in case you have any questions, but I do believe Comcast hired them as a subcontractor to get this work done as soon as possible.
Any questions from the board? The pleasure?
Move approval. Second.
Okay, Matt, Malcolm, By roll call, Matt?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay, next up is Nantucket Preservation Trust, request for approval of historic preservation restriction to be held by Nantucket Preservation Trust Incorporated for the property located at 23 to 25 Fair Street.
So according to your policy for conservation restriction and historic preservation restrictions, this is a two-part process where you have a preliminary review that occurs first, and then the CR or HPR goes to town council for review and the issuance of a report. So your preliminary review happened in September of 2023, and this is the final document coming to you. And Mary Bergman, I think, is in the back to answer any questions if you might have.
Any questions from the board on this? This is, we have seen it before, so,
And if you move approval, just please find it in the public interest.
okay. Questions or pleasure of the board?
I move we find it in the public interest and approve.
Okay, second? Okay, so Matt and Malcolm, by roll call, Matt?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay, next up is the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee Quarterly Report. Leah?
Thank you. Leah Hill, Coastal Resilience Coordinator.
There we go.
Is this on?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. So tonight I'm actually going to give 2 quarterly reports. All right, so the first, oh,
Is the first one in the original packet?
yes.
Are we playing catch up?
Pardon?
Are we playing catch up? Yeah.
So Erica, that's the second quarter.
This is the original one you gave me.
I sent 2. So one was a while ago, and that was the first quarter. And then I sent you 2 second quarters and updated the second quarter one.
All right, I missed the first one. So
Okay.
why don't you start this one? and
Okay.
Go into, I'll try to find the first one.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we're going to start with the second one from April to June of 2024. Next slide. Okay, so, sorry, this is not the updated one.
Just too many.
This is, okay, that's it, yes. So before I jump into the quarterly report, it was requested that I give 2 kind of overview updates about 2 resiliency projects that are currently underway. So the first is the Washington Street Resilience Project. This work group was established back in August of 2023, and it has members from the Select Board, the Land Bank Commission, and then NPEDC, and then it has a lot of staff members from both the Land Bank, the town, and Remain. So we've been meeting about once a month. Now we're meeting twice a month to work on this project. It's focusing on Francis Street Beach, the parcel across the street where the Artists Association cottages used to be, and then also the Salt Marsh Center. We finalized an MOU between the Land Bank and the town, and we have just finalized the contracts with Scape and Tie and Bond, which are 2 consultant companies that will be helping us with this project. It's anticipated to be 26 weeks, and they'll be developing 2 alternatives and then bring that preferred alternative to schematic design or 30% design. We have a robust outreach and education plan, and that is kicking off this month. We are hoping to meet with the abutters at the end of the month and then have a big open house the first week of August. And within this, some deliverables are a benefit cost analysis, of course, the design that I just mentioned, and the operation and maintenance. And I know the public has seen some conceptual renderings of this area and Washington Street as a whole. I just want to reiterate that they are conceptual designs at this point, which means that they're an idea. It's, some things that could potentially happen, but they have not gone through the rigorous process of permitting or, outreach and engagement of the abutters. So please take that. And there is a project website too through the town. The next slide, please. So another project that is going on, different location, kind of similar idea, is the downtown neighborhood flood barrier initial phase. So if you remember, we received a CZM grant for this project, and this project will, through community engagement, again, meeting with permit agencies and doing risk assessments, will develop a preferred alternative, again, to the 30% design. So we have just received the final report for the existing conditions and flood risk assessment. And so it looked at the different flood pathways on Easy Street and the elevations and different models to see, the current flooding today, and then as the years go on with sea level rise. And from that, if we take no action just in the project area, then that is estimated to cost $1.2 billion in expected losses from now until 2070. And this is a significant increase from what that estimate was while the CRP was being formulated. We also have a draft report and soon to be final report for the concept and feasibility report. So in that, there are 5 different alternatives for that area. And one is take no action, and then 4 are the actual design alternatives. And we are moving into the outreach and engagement part of that project. So again, setting up direct abutter meetings, hopefully in the end of July, and then planning a joint open house with both the Easy Street project and the Francis Street Beach project, so the community can come to one forum and learn about both projects together. Next slide, please. All right, so getting into the quarterly report. The Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, they gave input into the Harbor Action Plan update. They completed a homeowner survey, created an informational brochure for real estate agents and home buyers. They had a site visit to downtown. They had a recap on the coastal resilience districts, discussion with all of the regulatory boards and commissions on the island. And then I taught a continuing education class for real estate agents. Next slide, please. So they had 2 meetings that they went, joint meetings with the Harbor Action Plan update. And during that meeting, or during those meetings, they talked about how to incorporate coastal resiliency into that update. The former plan did not have a section for coastal resiliency, so this update will. And they gave input about potential solutions and recommendations. Some of those sections included cohesion between town plans, rising sea levels, infrastructure protection and prioritization, private versus public costs, community involvement in planning for climate change, and structural versus nature-based protections, and of course, education as well. Kind of the take home here was that the Harbor Action Plan will point to the Coastal Resiliency Plan as much as possible. Next slide. They had a great presentation by Kirk Bosma from the Woods Hole Group. He helped develop the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model, and this model predicts saltwater flooding from coastal storms for 2030, 2050, and 2070. We decided to have him come and talk to the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee and really get to the nitty-gritty of this model, because there were questions that arose during the local wetland regulation updates about kind of if there were issues with this, and what it really came down with was that letter was saying that there were more issues with sea level rise projections, but the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model is not projecting sea level rise, it's projecting if areas will be flooded during coastal storms. So sea level rise is an input into that model, but it's not just a sea level rise model. And so they're great questions from the committee, and I'm hoping to get the updated layers onto our town GIS so that the community can see how their property may be affected during coastal storms. Next slide. We had Peter Morrison come and talk about or give the results for a survey that the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee sent out through the Civic League, and it was on the town website as well. We had about 400 participants from 24 different areas, which was fantastic. And some of those questions were, what are the biggest concerns today regarding coastal hazards related to sea level rise on their property or within their neighborhood? And the two top were erosion and storm impacts. The other questions were, do you have concerns about your property or your neighborhood for the future? Are you currently implementing coastal resiliency measures? And then from your perspective, how can CRAC help your neighborhood within their capacity? So we got some great feedback on that. And then the committee, if you can go to the next slide, talked about where do we go from here. They decided to keep the survey open, and that's the QR code that will bring you right to the survey. It takes, I would say, less than 5 minutes to complete that survey. They decided that would be a good idea to print little cards with the QR code that can be passed out at different forums during the summer and fall. Continue giving homeowner association presentations, which last summer I gave, I think, 4 or 5 of those. And then kind of looking ahead, when we get all of the results, what are we going to do with that information? And they had talked about creating kind of a roadmap for each neighborhood. So, if you live in, let's say, Bryant Point, these are the risks that you're facing currently and risks for the future. And here are some things that you can do on your property to mitigate those risks. They also talked about creating a resilience guide for yards. So, what kind of native vegetation to use, reducing the pervious services, and then create a home buyer's brochure, which we actually did later, and I'll explain later on. Next slide. So they had a meeting and we talked about the real estate and home buyer's brochure. This really came from a public comment that we had during the meeting. It was a catalyst for this, and a need to educate real estate agents and home buyers on coastal hazards and risks. So CRAC gave input on what to include into this. I'd like to thank the communication office for helping me put this brochure together. I also taught a continuing education class for the Nantucket real estate agents on coastal resiliency. So thank you, NARB, for having me there. There were between 40 and I'd say 45 real estate agents that attended that class. And when I went in, I didn't know how it was going to go. It was either going to go really bad or pretty good. And it actually went really well. Got some great feedback, and they have a fiduciary obligation to disclose the risks to their clients. So I, went through the coastal resilience plan and told them that they can use that as a resource as well as contacting me to see for specific properties. Next slide. So this is what the guide looks like. It's a trifold. I have them all printed, so if anybody would like any, please send me an email. Basically what it is each section has a different map or model, so erosion, flooding, groundwater table rise, and there's QR codes. And so you can just go on to either that map or that model, put in your address, and it will bring up what your projections are for the future. So, there's directions there, there's information of what you'll find when you go to that specific website and how it can affect you. And then there's a section that says questions that that you should ask about your property when you're dealing with real estate agents or before you buy a house. Next slide. So we went on a site visit as well. We started at Children's Beach, and I talked about the segment of the downtown neighborhood flood barrier that would start at Children's Beach, that would create a dune area there to reduce flooding. And then we talked about the concession stand there, the resilience project that is currently going on. We walked to Easy Street, and I went over the Easy Street resilience project with them and the different risks that we found. And then we ended at the Francis Street Beach. So again, that Washington Street project that I'd spoken to about at the beginning of this presentation. Next slide. We had a town meeting recap on Articles 67 and 69 by Vince Murphy. And the committee's consensus was that, there was a lot of confusion about these articles at town meeting, and that we should try to do some more education and outreach around coastal resiliency and especially town meeting articles. And a suggestion was to host a forum for the public to come and ask questions and just talk about, coastal resiliency in general and ongoing projects. So hopefully we will start that soon. Next slide, please. The committee has really been doing a lot, or trying to do a lot of outreach and engagement with the community. We're still posting every Thursday on our social media. We have reached back out with the aligned organizations to see if they can put some information into their newsletters. We've contacted the local media to see if they can highlight coastal resilience topics, get it in the newspapers in the current, and then which I just mentioned, hold a coastal resilience forum for the public to ask questions, and then speak to the different forums that are actually happening during the summer. So, the Civic League's President's Breakfast, which I'll be speaking at in August, State of the Harbor, and then the Climate Change Summit. Next slide. We had a presentation by Jen Carberg from the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, and she gave an update about CRP recommendation 4-3, so it's the CO2 Erosion Management and Dune Resilience Project. This is in partnership with the Nantucket Conservation Foundation and the trustees. They received a National Fish and Wildlife grant for this. So they're going to be developing nature-based coastal resilience alternatives for 2 locations. One is the Hollover, one is Cascada Pond. So with that, they're going to be doing more site assessment, design alternatives, and then that preferred alternative, they'll move that to 30% design. Next slide. Peter, if you want to come up. Peter Brace is the chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. We're going to tag team this slide. So we had 2 meetings, and at those 2 meetings, we focused on discussing with regulatory boards and commissions on island. So I'm not going to list them all, they're on there. But it was really great meetings. And Peter, do you want to give a little background?
Get this thing up here. I don't even think it's high enough. And I got a deep voice, so you guys will hear me. So I had the idea to, it's definitely research. We are the longest term, what's the word I'm looking for? We're the longest range planning entity on the town, even over the Planning Commission. We plan decades ahead for what's coming when the water is coming up. And now that our plan exists, we want our regulatory boards to speak the same language that the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee speaks. So what that meant to us was to learn how these boards are interacting with the public. Were they speaking with the public coming in and asking questions? How is my application? How is it impacted by coastal resilience? Is there anything I have to do? Were these regulatory boards then talking back to the public and giving advice or not? And it was very interesting to find out who was on board and who was saying what to applicants. And so from this, we're informing you that we're working on recommendations to you guys and to the regulatory boards for policy changes and regulation changes, updating to coastal resilience standards. So I guess we want advice that you guys can give us. Which direction should we go? Of course, we're going to go in the direction we think is best for us, but we want to hear from you. And I know you'll talk through Matt, who's our representative, select board representative, but we envision that over time, and it'll take a while, but we envision that there will be policies that you have to adhere to when you apply to the Conservation Commission, when you apply to the Planning Board or the HDC. I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't want people all fired up about things that haven't even happened yet, but sea level rise and coastal resilience need to be in people's minds when they are building within low-lying areas, areas where that'll eventually or already being affected by sea level rise.
So the feedback that we got during these meetings from the different chairs of the regulatory boards and commissions was that the general consensus was that their regulations need to be updated. So they're, pretty old. They haven't considered sea level rise or coastal risks and hazards that are currently happening or happening in the future. And so they had all asked if we could look at that and offer comments. We obviously know that it's a long process, but this is kind of the start. So just to look at it and give comments with the coastal resilience lens on.
And we're advisory. It's not, we can't tell any of them what to do, but some of them said, geez, we'd like you to come and give us some recommendations. We're listed in this document, but we don't know where to start. So it was actually very helpful. It was cooperative. It wasn't adversarial. So.
Yeah. And there are two high priority recommendations within the coastal resilience plan that relate to this. So the first is to update zoning bylaws, and then the second is to update the wetland regulations, which we know the public hearing is, or the last public hearing is tomorrow. So
I'll just add just a little bit more. And so we envision that there will be there may be things that will be changes to the HDC's policies when we consider historic buildings that are within the flood zones, within the low-lying parts of the island. We don't know what those are yet. Maybe you can think what they might be, but we're not going to speculate yet. Same thing with Planning Board and the Conservation Commission. That's obvious. So.
And then I think the last slide was is just the ending one, which we already spoke about, but that's what CRAC is asking now. And then I just want to remind the public that the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee meets every second and fourth Tuesday of each month, and that's on Zoom. It's the same link for every meeting. So for the public, we urge you guys to attend.
So before you go to the other, any questions or comments from the board on this report?
I have one, Madam Chair.
Sure.
When I look at Easy Street and I see, what was it, $1 billion with no action, how is that calculated?
So it's calculated through a formula, and I can send you all of that, but they look at the economic impact of, reoccurring flooding and what that would cost different structures to fix. And then, so economic, health impact, different disruptions to businesses and all of that. There's a bunch of different categories that go into that.
Is it sea level rise or is it coastal storming?
So it's both. It's flooding from sea level rise and then flooding from coastal storms as well.
I'm a natural skeptic, I'm sorry. But I mean, this is all based on modeling. So one little error in the modeling and with no sensitivity, then it could be nothing. So we may be taking an enormous gamble of spending this money.
Or we may, if we don't spend the money, we're going to be spending more
But
later
see,
on. So
I would just argue, you don't
But we
really
do use the best available models for all
Yeah.
of these. And the Massachusetts coastal flood risk model is really honed into Massachusetts and to Nantucket. So
I don't know if you could find this for me, but I'd like to see the models and what kind of sensitivity analysis was done.
sure, I can definitely
I
send you
would
that.
love that, because I see a lot of models and a lot of data, but I never see anyone present a sensitivity analysis. And that's key to understanding the validity of a model.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
And my guess is some of the increase, one of the inputs will be interest rates and costs, and there's been a lot of exchange, a lot of price increases, a lot of inflation, and interest rates are higher, so I'm sure some of that was just an automatic increase.
Right.
From before till now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in the numbers that we have do show it's cheaper to get ahead of some of this and take care of it than it is to play catch-up. So that's, but but I think what you're asking is.
Yeah, what
a
I would
good
like to
question.
see that, and then if,
Yeah.
maybe if you can find all that, then I'll come and we'll sit down.
Sounds
The other
good.
thing I would
Happy
like
do
to
that.
say is Doug Rose is helping a lot with the outreach. And it was, since he started, we've been tracking the number of people, what is it, 300,000 was it? Yeah,
Yeah, 300,000 impressions.
individual hits on the different things that have been put out. So people are interested, they are looking at it, they are reading some of it, which is great. And it's great to have Doug there because he can tell you how much they're listening or looking or not, which is good.
My comments are that it's always good to plan, to get ahead of the curve. We're often told we don't do enough of that. So I think this is a really important effort in that regard. Obviously, accuracy of planning is also important, to Malcolm's point. I like the idea of collaborating with the other boards and commissions on updating regulations. I think that we are trying to foster more collaboration and collective effort across different boards and committees throughout town government to make sure, to use my favorite phrase, we're all rowing in the same direction as much as possible in the various pieces of the work we do to govern the island. So thank you for that. Anybody else? Okay, you want to go?
Okay. Erica, were you able to find the first?
I was.
Okay.
Do you want to have Billy Cassidy ask that question or no?
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah, let's.
Hi, once again, I forgot I had raised my hand, but it was Dr. McNabb asked the question that I was going to ask. So thank you, Dr. McNabb, for asking that. I would like to double down and say that's a little more than 22 million bucks a year beginning now. Seems like a lot of money. I also completely agree that it is much better to be proactive about this, and I'm grateful for that. So, thank you.
Thanks, Billy. Okay, do you want to do the other
All
one?
right, now I'll do the first quarter report. So this was from January to March of 2024. Next slide, please. Some of the updates. So again, the Harbor Action Plan update, they prioritized the recommendations that have not been started from 2023 to 2030. So those are the implementation years that are within the Coastal Resilience Plan. They developed content for an informational brochure, which I spoke about in the last report. They did a site visit to the sewer treatment facility, submitted a grant, submitted multiple letters of support for the wetland regulation update, and then had multiple presentations. Next slide. So as far as the ranking goes, again, these were recommendations that had implementation years of 2023 to 2030 within the Coastal Resilience Plan that have not yet been started. And there's a list of 15 recommendations there, going from creating a retreat and relocation program to Nantucket road raising and bridge conversion. I'm not going to read through all of them, but they're on that slide. And the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee has been, talking about this for probably over a year to kind of prioritize the priority projects. So this is, they did that. Next slide, please. Okay, and then I gave an update on the Article 10 Coastal Resiliency funding. So Article 10 allocates $1 million a year for coastal resilience planning, and that must be approved through town administration. This year, that was bumped up to $1.25 million. And I presented about the projects from 2023 to 2026 that are not underway. There's 14 of those recommendations. There's about 1.1 million remaining. There's actually more now because of town meeting that just happened. And so far, that money has been used for grant matching, Polpis Road at Sacagawea Pond project, Baxter Road and Baxter Road relocation project. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go over this because I just spoke about it, about the giving input to the Harbor Action Plan regarding coastal resiliency. Next slide. Okay, so I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we can try.
It's opening it up already.
Okay.
Where your shipping address types itself.
Little
Where all your
commercial.
tabs go everywhere. Exciting news! There's a new way you can contribute directly to coastal resilience efforts on Nantucket. The town's Natural Resource Department, in partnership with Woods Hole Sea Grant, presents Nantucket's inaugural Coast Snap Station at the end of Hummock Pond Road, Emergency Beach Access Point number 6. Here's how it works. Scan the QR code on the sign, position your phone on the dock, snap a photo, and upload. It's that simple. Over time, photos of the area will provide valuable data, enabling researchers to monitor coastal changes and conduct essential sediment analysis. Coast Snap stations are also active on Martha's Vineyard and in Sandwich, Mass., demonstrating a collaborative effort to protect our coastlines. Together, we can protect Nantucket's natural beauty. Be a part of this joint effort and get out there. Every photo counts.
So this is at the end of Hummock Pond Road. It's been months in the making, and it's a way for the community to easily snap a picture, and those pictures will then create a time lapse so that we can see kind of the shifting sands from season to season and then year to year. And so it's just a way to get the community involved in monitoring erosion and accretion. So thank you to Woods Hole Sea Grant and to our communication office as well. The committee had a site visit to the sewer treatment facility. So David Gray gave us a tour of the facility, and then we went out to the area, to the beds where in the last 2 years has lost about 100 feet. So they got to see firsthand this erosion, and then it helped kind of envision the Coastal Resilience Plan recommendation, which is to create a dune system there that's reinforced, and then look at relocating some of those beds away from the vulnerable area. Next slide. They wrote 3 support letters to the Conservation Commission regarding the wetland ordinance and regulation update. Like I had mentioned earlier, this was a high priority within the Coastal Resilience Plan. Next slide. And then public outreach again. These are our handles, NRDACK for Instagram, and the Town of Nantucket Natural Resources for Facebook. And every Thursday, we post a coastal resilience related topic there. Next slide. They had a presentation by Arcadis on the downtown neighborhood flood barrier, so that Easy Street project that I mentioned before. It was the first public presentation for the project, went over the goals, the process, and the deliverables, and then asked input from CRAC about the project for goals and how to move it forward. Next slide. They had multiple meetings about to discuss the Bylaw and Home Rule petition for the island's coastal resilience districts. So Vince Murphy, Kate Edwards from Arcadis, and Vicky Marsh, part of our town council, spoke. So the bylaw was to allow the select board to map the sub-districts. That's the portion of it that got passed at town meeting. And then the home rule petition would have allowed the select board to charge the benefited properties. That is what failed at town meeting. So this picture just depicts what a CRD could look like. And so you have an area along the beach, and let's say a neighborhood or a section of a road wants to do an erosion or flood control project. You've got houses that directly abut that. They would be the primary beneficiaries. you have a public road, and then you have houses on the other side of the road, and those would be the secondary beneficiaries. And this area would also have, let's say, a public parking area. And so that kind of just maps out the area, and then from that, you would figure out who pays what for that project. So that's kind of CRDs in a nutshell. Next slide. Again, I mentioned this before. They developed or helped develop an informational brochure for real estate agents and home buyers. Next. They also submitted a grant to the offshore wind grant. And so that was to translate the CRP into Spanish and then produce a video about coastal resiliency on Nantucket. Unfortunately, that was not awarded. Next slide. And that's all I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions from the board? Okay,
All
thank
right,
you
thank
very
you.
much. That was very comprehensive.
Sorry about that, Lance.
Okay, next up, Department of Public Works request for a letter of support for paint stewardship program. Is Chris going to lead us on this? Okay, Chris? Chris Lowe, our solid waste manager. Hopefully he's ready. There we go.
Sorry about that.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Brooke. Yes, so solid waste DPW we're looking to get the support for the from the select board to approve and adopt paint care for Massachusetts, which is a bill in the House. It has been in the House a few times now and has not been approved. Paint care is important to Nantucket because of the fact that when we do our household hazardous waste collections, almost 1/3 of what we collect is of oil-based paint. And last year we did hold a separate latex paint collection. So just alone in the savings on the household hazardous waste collection, and we could, the town could see a savings of $35,000 to $40,000 a year, not to mention the collection of latex paint that would be done. It's a bill that has been adopted in 13 states, and in New England, Massachusetts and New Hampshire are the only holdouts. So I'm just looking for the select board support on this.
Any questions from the board?
Well, just sort of, the question I have is how would it, just for people to understand, how would it be implemented here? What would change here for people, just so they understand on that?
Yeah, Chris, can you explain the details a little bit?
Sure. So, I mean, today, well, last year we used to collect oil-based paint at our household hazardous waste collection, and that did not allow us to collect water-based paint. With this bill, a fee would be added to every gallon of paint purchased through the paint care bill. I'm sorry, by the paint care bill. And that amount of money, that fee that's added to it, paint care would set up a collection depot on the island at a designated location to collect the paint. And once they get enough paint, paint care would come over with their own truck and take the material away.
Okay. Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve sending a letter of support for the paint stewardship program.
Second that?
Okay. By roll call, Tom?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay. Thanks for that, Chris.
Thank you.
Sounded like he was describing my garage about 20 years ago. It was full.
Okay. Tracy's here to move us into the real estate matters. These are land exchanges that have been in process for quite some time, and we're, I believe, at the tail end. And I'll have Tracy present this to us. Tracy, if you could just sort of present it as a whole package, rather than going item by item, that would be great. 'cause I think
Right,
that would be
thank
more
you,
time
Gwen.
efficient.
Right, and so I'm just going to attempt to summarize rather than itemize each property. So these were, as you said, they're part of a long range, been going on for quite a while, and between the land bank and town of Nantucket. It was originally a home rule petition, Article 92, at the 2021 annual town meeting. It then had to be revoted in subsequent years because the state legislation hadn't passed. It's now passed under Chapter 93 Acts of 2022. It was approved on June 22nd, 2022 to approve a land exchange to promote effective and efficient management of each of the parcels under the proper stewardship for which the parcels are currently used. So the town of Nantucket is conveying Mill Hill Park, which is a number of parcels, to the land bank in exchange for the Novadear playing fields and a portion of the bike path at 2 Milestone Road. And the total square footage of the land for each party is roughly the same. And so I'm requesting that the select board approve and sign these conveyances. It's quite a victory over a long period of time.
Any questions?
I'll move approval.
We're getting an echo.
Oh, Jesse's.
Jess, go ahead.
Jesse.
Oh, we'll hear from Jesse Bell from the Land Bank.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to acknowledge Ken Bogrand's role in shepherding this through over the last few years and the good collaboration we had on this, as well as many other joint land bank and town real estate initiatives. A long time coming. And also thanks very much to Tracy for bringing it home to completion.
Great, thanks, Jesse.
Move
Okay.
approval on all three?
Okay, and Erica, is there anything specific we need in the motion? Okay, so we have a motion to approve all three items. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, by roll call, Matt?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Congratulations on finishing up a longstanding project. Okay. I managed to not print the last page of the agenda. There we go. So we're on to town manager's report. Nothing? Okay. And then select board reports and comments. We requested that the Natural Resources Department give us a summary of the proposed Conservation Commission regulation changes that will be discussed at a public hearing tomorrow evening. The board really wanted our audience to get a view of these as a second look beyond that public hearing process. So,
Sure. So good evening. I'm Jeff Carlson, the Natural Resources Director, and with me tonight's our Conservation Agent, Will Delerba. We've prepared a little presentation that we are going to give at the meeting tomorrow as well that just walks through kind of section by section. So I'll try to be brief. I know we've already had kind of a long meeting, so Erica, if you can jump ahead. So really quickly, in summary for us, the Commission's allowed to develop these regulations under the existing bylaw. Currently, there are 5 articles and some appendices. We've looked at fees, updated taxonomy. Town council's reviewed all of the changes that are to date. Resiliency was a big interest that we added. It was new. Obviously, that's changed since our last update in 2013. And I always caveat this, that this summary doesn't include anything that we caught that was grammatical or numbering or any other ministerial changes that we made. All right. Next. So real quickly, our first article, this is kind of our procedural article with definitions and procedures. We've only made changes to some definitions and some procedures. Next slide. In the definitions, you can see the list there of the definitions that were either added or revised. Just to go really quickly, things like coastal resiliency plan and coastal resilience were obviously something that was added from our update last time. Two kind of interesting ones that we've added that we'll break out here are minimum wetland size and structure. Go ahead, Erica. So just as a point of background, minimum wetland size, currently on Nantucket for vegetated wetlands, we don't have a minimum size. So if your wetland is the size of a quarter, it's just as jurisdictional as one that's an acre in size. And that's created some headaches and some problems and some debates back and forth. So what we are trying to do is create something a little more tailored to Nantucket, where we're having this minimum size of 500 square feet that will hold the buffer zones and be jurisdictional. The state limit is 5,000 square feet. Obviously, in the mainland, it can be a little bit bigger. What's unique about this area for us, the way we're approaching it on Nantucket, and it's currently proposed, is that if you're under 500 square feet, there's still some value and some use to it, is we're giving folks the opportunity to locate that on their site without reducing it in size, and to use it for something like green infiltration for surface water runoff for doing that. So we can still get the benefits without the impacts, but still not constraining sites unfairly or creating undue burdens on folks for an area that's relatively small. All right, Erica, next one. For structure, there's been some debate about this. We put some clarifications in there for things that weren't listed in the list, things like swimming pool equipment. And also the commission spent some time discussing and tackling this idea of impervious surfaces being structures as opposed to pervious surfaces and how that's worked. Typically, stone patios have not been structures. The current commission and its makeup has preferred to view that going forward as a structure for water infiltration purposes. All right, Erica? Some other procedures that we've added something for our larger property owners to look at, to do a little bit more of a 10-year planning view with the commission, which we're kind of excited about. We're also excited about minor activities, which is for something that instead of putting someone through the full public process, if you want to come in and say, we want to take part of our lawn and put it back to netted vegetation, staff can approve that and not have to go through the full hearing process. If it's something that staff deems it needs the full hearing process, they have the ability to put it to the commission, but trying to provide something for people to streamline some minor activities. The state has a similar provision in their act, so we're mirroring that to some degree. And we've added a new waiver criteria of this overwhelming public benefit as we moved into coastal resiliency. Some of these larger projects don't always fit as well within the current regulatory structures, both state and locally. Trying to find some help to still meet performance standards, but to gain some relief when necessary for something that's so overwhelmingly good to try to draft that. All right, Erica? I know this one's super hard to see because it's tiny. This is just kind of a revised fee structure. We're mirroring the state procedure for that. We've also compared with a lot of data provided by the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions and comparable fees for folks. And then we still obviously try to also tailor our fees to, what it actually costs to review or put time and effort towards reviewing applications. So some updates to that as well. All right, Erica? All right, so now to the nitty-gritty of some of the changes. Each one of our resource areas has performance standards and definitions that go with it. And there's just some updates to these, and I'll try to go quickly. For land under the ocean, we've included some information on eelgrass and the description and its importance. Within coastal beach, we've updated a couple of the performance standards. One of them requires an alternatives analysis for work on a coastal engineering structure. Just real quickly, coastal engineering structures are structures designed to impact the movement of sand and water in the littoral zone. For the most part, there are some other sticky parts to that, but that's what those are for. And then there's a performance standard now that is also, we've always kind of looked at multiple erosion rates, but now we're looking at them in two different timeframes as well. And we're targeting mitigation to be based upon whatever the higher rate is. And I know kind of the big ticket item that's listed there is updated number 6 for buffer zones. This will apply to most of the resource areas, but we have a separate graphic for that helps explain that. All right, Erica? Coastal Dune and Coastal Bank obviously have that same buffer zone. And Coastal Bank is also adding that similar alternatives analysis that Coastal Beach has for coastal engineering structures. Barrier Beach, there's no changes. There's no buffer zone to Barrier Beach either. And currently Barrier Beach, both by state and local regulation, don't allow for new development. Right. Go ahead, Erica. Salt marsh, the same buffer zones again. You're going to see that a lot. And we added a new performance standards that really is targeted towards enabling folks to help restore salt marsh. The current regulations didn't really address it very well. Salt marsh migration and restoration is a big goal of the Coastal Resiliency Plan, and really felt like it was something we wanted to be able to develop for folks to be able to do that on properties that contain salt marsh. All right, you can go ahead. Some minor changes to land subject to coastal storm flowage, kind of in conjunction with the Coastal Resiliency Plan. There's some new restrictions on building within high tide flooding areas. And then we've also added a new performance standard. This was debated quite a bit, that any pools within land subject to coastal storm flowage would be required to have that surface elevation of the pool above the flood elevation. So just as a quick example, if the flood elevation is 8, the surface water of that pool has to be above 8. So the floodwaters don't directly interact with that flood elevation. Right, Erica? So now into the inland resource areas, again, the buffer zones. We've always had this, well, we haven't always had it, but since the early 2000s, there's been a 2-foot separation to groundwater for structures. We provided some guidance and clarity and process to how we review and determine that, and also, some waiver interest in that. All right, Erica, go ahead. And this is the buffer zone change. I know this is what kind of everyone's talking about. I'll try to walk through it, and maybe Will add in if I make hash of this. But real quickly, kind of starting from the very bottom of the graphic, is anything that's outside the 100-foot buffer zone doesn't require review. It's outside of jurisdiction in most cases, so no permit is needed. Marching towards the top, the 100-foot buffer zone, so from 75 feet to 100 feet, structures would be allowed with an order of conditions. So that's our jurisdiction lines, that 100-foot. Currently, structures are allowed down to the 50. So this is where we're going to get into the proposed change. So for structures between 50 to 75, you can still gain a permit without a waiver, but you have to enhance the undisturbed buffer zone, that area between the 25 and 50-foot space, by 1.5 times the structural development in that zone. So hopefully, if it makes sense, you can kind of see where the top of the house is in the graphic. You're adding on increased buffer zones to that. It's kind of a practice that happens quite a bit now for structures that are in similar positions or in structures that are not compliant within the 50 to 25, where you see some of this buffer zone enhancement or mitigation for it. And the way that it's currently written, if the structure already exists, you're not penalized for the existing structure, but if you want to put an addition on that structure, you're mitigating only for that addition, not for the structure that was pre-existing, is the way it's currently proposed. I know we've kind of made that graphic a bunch of times and worked with a number of people to get it, and it's not always super clear. A lot of sticky notes and drawn on a lot of whiteboards for folks. But the basic idea is to create a larger undisturbed buffer zone and enhancing the area around the resource area in exchange for some development in areas that are in proximity without extreme limitations or moving out. The original proposal was to move structures completely out of 75, but to gain some flexibility and the commission some discretion. Obviously, if you can't meet any of those conditions, you can still apply for a waiver, which is still within kind of current practice of the commission. All right, Erica?
You might want to jump in back.
Sure.
Back, if you can go back one slide real quick.
Real quick, I just wanted to make it clear, the 25 no disturb zone is unchanged. The 25 to 50, I just wanted to note that there's a 50% disturbance of that area allowed in the new proposed regulation, but it's going to be non-structural under the new definition. So essentially that's lawn or landscaping in up to 50% of that space. But you would say a potential applicant had 50% of that disturbed and available, and they wanted to add 500 square feet of structure into between the 75 and 50, then they could, in a way contiguous with whatever's existing, kind of trade in some of that 50% disturbance that's allowed, if that makes sense. I don't want to muddy the waters at all, but.
Yeah, I think that's good. So if you have questions, like we said, the public hearing on this is tomorrow. So all right, go to the next one. There's another new resource area that our Commissioner Engelberg proposed for a Great Pond area, and it's just to kind of ensure that these sensitive areas around our great ponds are being managed to encourage kind of these natural habitat linkages. It's just a minor activity request for work that's between that 100 and 200 foot zone. Again, it's just trying to make sure that we're helping with landscape and those habitat linkages for our wildlife in those areas that utilize those ponds. All right, Erica, next one. So now we're moving into our appendices and those things. We haven't made any changes to the activities in buffer zone for Article 4. Fertilizer BMP is obviously unchanged. That's a document that was issued by the Article 68 work group. Our invasive species lists, we've transitioned from listed species to just using the published list from state agencies and some federal agencies and provide those links. All right, Erica. Two new appendices at the end. One is focused specifically at swimming pools. It supplements the town's illicit discharge regulations that you guys passed about a year ago now, but also just to give guidance to folks in these areas on how to properly manage their pools in these sensitive areas. And then the last one that I know we're excited about, because this is something we get questions about a lot. You could call this our vista pruning management, but we're calling it view shed management. And instead of a blanket prohibition on vista cutting, we're taking the approach of let's tell people how to do it successfully and do it the best way. It creates things like encouraging view corridors, proper tree, shrub, and ground cover management for different heights. So we can still have all the benefits, people can maintain their view, but instead of clearing it down to nothing and letting it grow up, trying to encourage people to do it in a responsible way and get what everyone's looking for. Right, Erica? So again, the next public hearing is tomorrow. It's right here in this room. It starts at 5 p.m. Obviously, if folks have comments, they can email them to Will. If you can't get a hold of Will, feel free to send them in to me as well. We're open to any questions or participation. This is a process that launched pre-COVID and kind of stalled out and has been carrying on. But there's a lot of really good benefits. I know there's some that folks have questions about, but there's really a lot of good, and I think we believe at a staff level, the changes are really encouraging protecting our natural resources better than we currently are, and providing people a lot of opportunity to try to improve what they're doing and helping on our buffer zones and wetland resource areas.
Okay, I'm going to reiterate, I see a hand up. We're not taking public comment tonight because that will be available at tomorrow night's Conservation Commission public hearing, but I will offer the board an opportunity to ask questions about the presentation. Anybody?
Just one question. Is part of the thought process on the 50%, if you do 50% more, what is it, between 25 and 50? Is part of the thought process sort of self-interest, that if they extend it, but they extend the wetlands a bit, you know, they're going to help themselves by having more places for water to go, et cetera, or?
Yes and no. So I think with the expansion for those buffer zones, part of it, one, is creating a larger undisturbed buffer zone. One, you're protecting the wetland more. You're not enhancing the wetland directly, but the buffer zone. But I think, you know, what we're looking at is, especially in coastal areas where we're seeing, you know, wetland migration and coastal things that are there, those interaction points are where we see loss and damage come in. By creating more buffer zones and the, you know, the CRP contemplates this too. By creating a little bit more of a buffer zone, you can prolong that from happening, or you can extend the life of that. The 50% disturbance rule has been in on bordering vegetated wetlands since the mid-2000s. So there's no real change there, with the exception of structures moving out and then the required enhancement for those. But that 50% was there.
All right.
We do see some benefit to obviously greater wetland protection and things that are there. And they're obviously, I don't want to preach to the choir, but our wetlands are our natural filters for water and help when we recharge groundwater. They ultimately go there and go to groundwater. And the better we can protect them, the better we can protect our own resources.
Dawn has her hand up.
I have 3 questions. One is, have any other coastal communities with the amount of wetland resources that we have undertaken this level of restriction? Number 2 is, which I know that the Concom, because it's not really within their purview, has not done sort of an economic analysis of this, of how many properties are impacted, either becoming less buildable or entirely non-conforming and unbuildable, and what that could potentially do to our tax base. And number 3 was, sorry, I'm losing it now. Notice on this. I think that if these are instituted, it really wouldn't be fair to have them take effect immediately, and realistically, with the amount of pressure that surveyors are under in general, people should have probably maybe something like a year's notice, so that they could put in applications to do with their property what they thought they could do before these go into effect. And then people would be on notice going forward that these new regulations are impacting them.
Sure. So I'll try to take those as best I can. I'll probably work in reverse. So at the last discussion of these, kind of the earliest date that the commission was talking about them going into effect, that seemed to be at least palatable to everyone, was probably January 1 of the coming year, which would get everyone about, at this point, about 5 to 6 months before they would become effective to get stuff in. We know projects are in development and spots and where those are in varying stages. Certainly that comment can be discussed by them tomorrow. I can't speak for them for timeframes for implementation, but I think at a staff level, we always encourage giving more notice to help projects that are already underway get wrapped up, but also for people to make design decisions. To back up to the other ones, as far as a direct study of economic impact, the commission has not done a direct study of economic impact. We have looked a lot at, and we did a fair amount of staff review looking at kind of comparable communities for what we're seeing across the Commonwealth, not just in coastal, but also in inland communities. And we're in general seeing a pretty interesting trend of not everyone does it the same. We're seeing a lot of areas where they're doing just ratio-based mitigation requirements for developed within buffer zones. There are some communities that, for any work inside the 100, are requiring upward of, I know we looked at it, the highest number I saw was 4 to 1. Was a couple communities that do a 4 to 1, so that would be in the 100. If you wanted to build a 1,000 square foot house, you're doing 4,000 square feet of some kind of mitigation on your property. Those mitigation ratios seem to be the most common approach. I think where we looked at it from a staff level when we kind of put together the current proposal was that doesn't always work here because lot areas can be smaller. Our resources are vast. We're one of the few communities that has really, outside of the Cape and Islands, all of the resource areas where they're all the coastal and all of the inland ones. The only one we don't have is river area. To look at that, to kind of look at a way to not create a punitive situation. And I think that's where what the goal of the proposal was to look at it and try to give property owners and applicants their ability to make the decisions about how they wanted to apply and how they wanted to look at those areas and where they wanted to look at it, while still leaving the existing waiver process intact. So if you can't meet those standards, you can ask for a waiver, and you have to meet the criteria. Are the most typical ones we see are no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative, long-term net benefit, are probably the two most common ones we see, but you at least get the chance to present your case to the commission on why you would qualify. So I think we feel pretty comfortable that probably not a huge impact, but something we certainly could explore some.
Madam Chair, I just have one comment on that. It could be that if you don't have these regulations, there would be another negative impact, economic impact. I mean, this island is starting to get overdeveloped. Part of our lore is our beautiful coasts and our wetlands, and if we don't have them, people won't come. So, I mean, you could talk about this and make hypothetical comments forever, but I think there's great economic advantage by actually having these regulations. And the other thing I'd like to say is comments I've got is people complaining about them haven't read the regulations. All right, so I would advise you all out there, if you have questions, before you go to the meeting tomorrow night, read the regulations and study it. And you may find it's not all that you've been told how horrible they are. Thank you.
People have questions. We'll be in the office all day tomorrow, 131 Pleasant Street, second floor. You can come find Will or I, and we're happy to discuss them with anybody.
We're very friendly.
Well, you're smiling.
Most of the time.
Okay. Any other questions to the board? Comments? Thanks to both of you. This was a fairly last-minute request, and we really appreciate it.
No problem, anytime.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Next up is review and vote to revise the language of Senate Bill number 2417. It was a home rule petition on transfer of lots. Tracy, I'm sorry we made you stay. We should have switched the orders of these. So you need to unmute.
Oh, sorry, that's okay. So it's pretty simplistic. This is another matter that's been kind of a long range thing. And we've been trying to get it passed at the legislation level. It's currently in conservation purposes, and we need some more flexibility with Ames Ave in the future. So we're trying to convert it. And the Vicky Marsh, Town Council, has been working with legislative session to try to get this passed before it closes this year. And so they requested a minor revision from roadway and or any purposes to roadway and or any municipal purposes. So we're asking the board to vote to approve the change to roadway and or any municipal purposes.
Thanks, Tracy. Any questions from the board? Okay.
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, Matt?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you for waiting, Tracy.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay. Next up is discussion and adoption of the September 17th, 2024 special town meeting warrant. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Tom to just, for the public record, just to give a brief summary of the process by which we arrived at particularly the short-term rental article, which is the substantive probably meat of what we're going to be talking about tonight, unless the board has questions on any of the other. Why don't we start there? Does the board have any questions or concerns about any other aspects of the warrant?
Not specifically, Madam Chair. I mean, the proposed warrant.
Right, the draft that was in our packet,
Yes.
other than the short-term rental,
The other three.
the article, yeah. The short-term rental articles.
So maybe he should do the process, and then I can give my question.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Tom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes. So the process was that we set a timeline for a special town meeting on September 17th, and citizens submitted their warrant articles. And there are 6 total short-term rental articles, 3 for zoning, 3 for general bylaw. And the select board decided to designate 2 members of the select board to do a subcommittee to see if we could find consensus with the article petitioners. We asked that each citizen warrant article petitioner designated 2 speakers to come to the meetings. Select board voted to appoint myself and Malcolm to the subcommittee. We held 6 meetings, 5 with the groups of 2, and the groups were Charity Benz and Matthew Peel, Jim Sulzer and Grant Sanders, and Stephen Cohen and Stephen Morey for their respective articles. And also for the general bylaw, they were, Pamela Perrin was also in there, and I believe the other 2 were incorporated in the other 2. We really focused on a zoning article for this, and we held 6 meetings over 12 hours. All the meetings are on YouTube. They were 2 hours, at least 2 hours apiece. And the groups really drilled down on trying to find consensus on some very complicated issues. And largely, I let them speak on the process, but largely came to consensus at the end of the 12 hours. We can kind of get into that as they talk about their view of the process. I was very, very happy with how it went. I think we did make a lot of progress. And so now we have as in our packet on the draft warrant, a draft warrant article that came out of the 12 hours. And that's what we will be considering tonight. And I just wanted to make one note that this subcommittee was not like the short-term rental work group, which was appointed by the select board at the time. This was an attempt to take in this case, the zoning article, the 3 citizen warrant article petition articles, and try and find consensus to make a select board sponsored article to put on the warrant. So we didn't go through a process like the select board at the time did for appointing different representatives. This article was crafted by the citizen warrant article petitioners themselves. Malcolm and myself were the moderators. Yes, I did opine a little bit here and there, but this was crafted by them themselves. And so I just wanted to make that clear that the process was a little bit different this time. So that may be more than you wanted, but that was more or less the process. And please, Malcolm or Madam Chair, Matt, please, Dawn, please do it.
So one question I have for you, Tom, is could you talk a little bit about public input to beyond the petitioners?
So going into this, Malcolm and I had intended to hold public comment on each of the sessions. And there was so much content and things to deliberate in a very tight time frame that we pushed off public comment to try and get through, because 2 hours is not, each meeting was not a lot. And so we designated the 5th meeting, which I believe was like a week ago Tuesday, 2 hours, 2-hour session for public comment, which we held. We had a few folks show up, including some folks who were here in the room. All the warrant article petitioners were there. We took public comment for an hour before we adjourned. And there was no additional public comment at that time. We have also received lots of emails. The packet was hundreds of pages by the time at the end of the 6 meetings. Erica was compiling, thank you for that. And many folks have reached out. So I think we Malcolm and I endeavored to take as much public comment as we could, but within the bounds and the constraints of having only 6 meetings. It was only supposed to be 5 meetings, and then we added an additional week because obviously we have to close this warrant tonight. And so there were multiple constraints. And describing process is always it's tough, but I think that we did the best that we thought we could on a short time frame.
I would say,
Step, sorry.
go ahead. No, just given the time, I was a little disappointed in the public comment session because we really didn't get a lot of public comment. But we certainly got enough emails and a lot of people stopping me on the street. So I got a lot of public input. So I think Tom said it all. And I will I'll wait for my questions till after I hear the three groups.
So before we open the discussion to the board, I really wanted to hear from the representatives.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll repeat that. I want to hear from the representatives, and then I think what I asked each of the groups to do by email this week was to prepare a statement, and I asked if they would please answer the question, do you support the draft article? If so, why? If not, why not? And I've asked them to designate one speaker from each pair. And I think we'll start with Charity, if she's the designee.
Can you hear me? Yes. It's very difficult to hear back there. I don't know what the acoustics are like, but don't hold my 3 minutes. I haven't started yet. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comment tonight. You have asked that we state why we either support or reject the article. We reject it. Here's why. Mr. Sanders and our articles contained a residential requirement to rent short-term. That has always been the Nantucket tradition. That provision was never considered by the subcommittee and dismissed without discussion. There were discussions about community. To us, a residential requirement equals community engagement. No residential requirement equals commercial investment. The introduction of the term operator to stand in the shoes of the owner confirms that. One must ask why communities all over the country are limiting short-term rentals to save year-round housing, and we are not. They get it that STRs are destroying their communities. Turning to the separate elements, we have no objection to 4, 6, 8, 9, and 10. I'm sure you have the article there. Our comments on the rest are, first, we categorically reject a Y in the use chart for the new term Nantucket vacation rental in residential zones. We made that clear at the meetings. This designation simply opens up neighborhoods to further exploitation, as Article 59 would have done. As we know, that article was soundly defeated. Second, we reject more than one license per property, permitting both a primary and secondary dwelling on one lot to be licensed, incentivizes the construction of secondary dwellings where none exist now. Third, we reject an 8-year wind-down period for STR owners having more than one lot. This is just one of the many loopholes designed to protect investors so that they can continue to monetize Nantucket. Fourth, while we agree to transfers of occupancy as a metric to control churn, primarily because the number of contracts can be verified by the state, we do not agree with 8 in July and August. Fifth, we do agree to the provision that disincentivizes new investors by restricting new lot owners to only 3 transfers in their first 5 years of ownership. Sixth, definitions for hosted stays and cottage colonies are not those in use on Nantucket. Element 7, which exempts them from all regulations, is a loophole open to serious abuse. The definition of hosted stay is one where the owner is present, not an operator. This term has crept into the article to permit someone other than the owner to operate a business for the owner. A cottage colony is one that predates zoning in 1972, not one with 4 dwellings as of the date of the approval of this article. Why is that?
You're about, time's up.
Please delete this exemption from the article, along with its 2 investor-friendly definitions. We believe that our article is the best fit for Nantucket. It is based on a simple residency requirement of 32 days. It incentivizes long-term rentals. It permits anyone who owns a lot.
Can you wrap it up?
I've just got this to read, okay? It permits anyone who owns a lot to STR for 28 days by right. The article before you guts 50 years of zoning and puts Nantucket's future in the hand of investors. Voters will be asked once again.
Charity, that's not a wrap-up. That's, you're continuing.
I'm what?
You're continuing past the
Okay, we
the
just think
allotted
the
time.
voters deserve a choice. We're
Madam Chair,
pleased
if you
that
give
ours
her
will
another
provide a
minute,
good
we
one.
can let the others have another minute.
Well, that's where we're, I have a timer. So we may ask questions. I just asked to limit the preliminary comments to 3 minutes so we could get through all three. That was the request that I made in advance. So, Stephen?
Yeah, before I respond to your question, I'd like to say that I'm terribly disappointed in that, but I'll leave my comments off. In response, so the people I represent, or I've been working with, not as an attorney, as a volunteer, fully support this article, even though they don't agree with it, because the very nature of compromise is you get some things you like and some things you don't. And this article is really, really good in important ways. It's simple, it's easy to understand, it's easy to enforce, it's not overly complicated, and it has provisions that actually address the goals that we set out in the beginning. And I want to make sure everybody understands what those goals are, because those goals are to address nuisances in neighborhoods. Those goals were to slow down the growth rate of STRs. They were to limit the impact of investor-focused STRs and to limit the impact of STRs on the real estate market. And I think that this does that in a very simple way, in a very effective way. I think that there were a lot of concerns that we had in the beginning about some of the provisions that would be overly invasive, potentially unsafe, overly complicated, and that would have a tremendously negative effect on locals and long-term residents and multi-generational residents, because they get swept up in the same rules that were targeting a very small and somewhat mythical group of investors that I think we were trying to avoid. And that's why we came up with the system that we did, that tries to not throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, we're going to target these investors, but really what we're doing is harming, multi-generational Nantucket families and locals who have been here. There are two changes that I think should be made. One of them, I think, is because I think it's an error in the drafting that John Giorgio did that is not consistent with actually what we talked about at the meeting. And one of them is just because I disagree with it, because it's not consistent with one of the compromises that we reached. And I'm probably going to skip the details on that here and save that for the planning board. Unless you have a question about it, I can tell you about it. I do have some concerns about the article, and I want to just put those out there, which is that I do think that one STR is really a really low limit that doesn't have the kind of benefit in the way that has an impact. I think that the sunset of the legacy provisions is really unfair to people who currently own these and invested in them. And I think that the 3 changes over 5 years is a little strict. I think we could probably do 4 over 3 years or something like that. But again, I think that really what's important is that we have rules that are simple, effective, enforceable, and address our goals, which I think we do, but also that we're not harming locals in order to attack investors. And I actually think we do that a little heavy. I think we could back off a little bit and still reach our goals. So at the end of the day, I think that the tools here are the right tools to get to the goals. And I think we have successfully avoided some of the negative tools. And I appreciate all the work that was done. I think Tom and Malcolm did a great job running what was a very difficult process. And I fully support something like this article moving forward to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you. And from the other group, Jim or Grant?
Grant Sanders. Thank you, everybody. We do support this compromise article. We think it's fair. It protects the traditional use on the island, even those traditional uses that are not an accessory use. And that's really the reason why we had to take the structure that we did. But it also allows us to protect the island against people who treat Nantucket as an investment class, not as a community. So we like that bit about it. It is a true compromise. We came in the middle, but we even were able to move in a couple of different directions on the deliberations. So we're really happy about that. For example, the changes in occupancy, we went in one direction, but we were able to get it to move in another direction for investor class folks. We removed the residency requirement from the compromise article largely because we had found out that, and we had learned that it likely violated the Dormant Commerce Clause and would be challenged. And I understand why people like the residency requirement, but I also want this thing to pass at town meeting. So it works to limit disruption in neighborhoods with the number of turnovers in July and August to 8 changes in occupancy, which is one more than the average number that occurs right now. But it is a lot less than the average number that occurs through Airbnb and VRBO. So we're able to keep the most disruptive types of short-term rentals at bay. It fixes the use in zoning, which is, we kind of forget that after a while, that we're really trying to fix zoning here. We're trying to make these lawsuits stop, which is kind of a good idea. And, I just want to say that once again, as I did during the subcommittee meetings, I want to pledge that we all should, well, I'm going to pledge that I will, and I hope that everyone else does this, that we talk about the issues, not the people that are behind the issues. We need to remove the rancor and the division from this debate and make it about what's good for the island. And I know there's been a lot of toxicity and negativity around this, and it just needs to come to an end. So thank you, Tom and Malcolm and Erica and John Giorgio, for doing your best job possible. It was the best 12 hours of my life. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I gave a little extra time to everybody. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is ask our board to ask questions. Town Council John Giorgio is on hand to answer any questions. This board has, I do believe that all of us attended or watched virtually all of these meetings in one way or another. So, and that was really the format we made. It was a select board meeting, so we could attend. So it was, we were able to be there and listen to the process as it played out. So Matt, you had started to say something, so.
No, I was going to let Malcolm go. No, I don't have anything right now, actually.
Malcolm?
What I was going to say earlier was I was going to correct. Tom said they originally were going to do, I think, 5 meetings. They added 1. I think they were going to do 3 or 4, and you added 2. So you really did. You added 2 or 3 meetings on the fly. So I wanted to correct that earlier. That's what my comment was earlier.
Thanks, Matt, for that correction. Malcolm?
Well, I would just
Oh, there we go.
of course, thank the 3 groups that participated in this. I wish we had more time to actually get into a general bylaw besides the zoning, because that's some of my issues. I'm sympathetic with all 3 groups. I think Charity had made some excellent points. I would, in some ways, I always talk about my heart and my head. My heart would like to support it better than my head, because I think, like it pointed out, the residency requirements becomes a legal issue, and we have to deal with that. I love the fact that it is simple, and I've always said it needed to be simple, but I would have wished we had gotten farther along when we really say, I'm not always sure it's totally enforceable, despite what's been said. And a lot of people I've talked to are still concerned about nuisance and noise, and the police aren't always going to show up on a July 9th, they have enough other things to do, and how are we going to enforce all these regulations? Who's going to enforce it? How are we going to enforce it? That has not really been worked out yet. And I think if it stays with the health department is certainly not staffed or ready or trained to deal with that. So I think that's an issue we have to deal with. Unfortunately, if any of these are, if this is approved, it wouldn't be, it'd be for another 9 months or another 6 months, so there would be some time. So I could criticize all three, I could compliment all three, but we have what we have.
And by the way, Don is recused on this topic, so, of short-term rentals, so, as has been the case all along. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, Matt, I'm not taking public comment. Your group.
I know, I just wanted to, excuse me, comment on Malcolm's, if I was allowed to.
No, I'm not.
General bylaws.
I'm not taking public comment. Thanks.
Was everybody okay with the ordering of the articles? Any
question on that?
wanting
Oh,
to-
actually, that's.
Okay, go ahead, Malcolm.
So we'll have 4 zoning bylaws essentially on the warrant. I was going to say, what order they go in? What happens if 2 are approved and 1 is not approved? And how do we deal with that?
Okay, so that is a legal question that I will pitch to Town Council. John, what happens if, for some reason, town meeting passes more than one of these?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we don't really have any control over the fact that the other 3 zoning articles are legally on the warrant, and town meeting will have its say. I certainly would recommend that this compromise article go first, and that is that is the order currently up on the screen. If it passes, I would hope that either the planning board or the FinCom or for that matter, the select board would move to indefinitely postpone the other 3 zoning articles. And then we would wind coming out of town meeting, we would have the one. But I can't obviously guarantee that that will be the result. I think we're going to have to, if that is not the result, we're going to have to take a look and see exactly what does pass and how it's amended first, whether it's consistent or inconsistent with each other. And we're just going to have to deal with that at unfortunately, probably on town meeting floor. So I would certainly strongly recommend to both all the groups, all the boards, and the representatives that if the first article passes, that in order not to create a nightmare of interpretation, that we not proceed, town meeting not proceed with a positive vote on any of the other 3.
I have another process question. There will be, I'm sure, robust public comment at planning first and then FinCom second. What is the process for making technical amendments if, wording changes or something come up? I just want the public to be informed about how that, what happens with technical changes versus substantive changes.
So as I'm sorry, Madam Chair, as a general proposition, the planning board has, when the planning board conducts its public hearing, it can certainly recommend changes to the article as a condition of its recommendation, as long as those changes are within the general scope of what was advertised for the planning board hearing. When we get to And what I would say about that is there are 4 zoning articles dealing with this same subject. Each one takes a slightly or maybe a significant different approach. And as we discussed under Article 60 at the annual town meeting, from the moderator's perspective, she can look to not just the one article that's being debated, but other articles of this on the same general topic on the warrant to make her scope determination. The more articles on the warrant, the more we debate this, the more times we attempt to do this at town meeting, I think the scope concerns become less and less because everybody knows what the issues are going into town meeting. And I suspect we can find, for the most part, bits and pieces of the various proposals to support amendments on town meeting floor.
Thanks, John.
But that comes with a huge caveat. I don't know what those amendments might be. None of us do.
Of course. I was really trying to hone in on helping the public understand the process part of this, because that is always an area of confusion. There's the substance, and then there's town meeting process that a lot of people are engaging in town meeting, for the first time or maybe more recently, and are not as familiar with how it all works. Anybody else have any remarks?
Madam Chair?
Yes, John.
So I just wanted to emphasize for the board members the fact that this subcommittee ultimately decided not to propose any changes to the general bylaws at this time, even though there are a number of petitioned articles to amend the general bylaws. And I would recommend that we stay away from that at this town meeting. Number one, it could unduly complicate town meeting. It could certainly lengthen town meeting, and that's a concern. Number two, Article 60 that was approved at the annual town meeting has not yet been approved by the Attorney General. And I think it's important that we wait and see what the Attorney General does with Article 60 so we know what base we're using to go forward. And then finally, I would really emphasize to everyone that the way the Chapter 123 is structured, the Board of Health, with the approval of the Select Board, may adopt regulations implementing this program. And that's already been done. There's already a set of regulations in place. It addresses nuisance conditions, but that's doesn't mean that they cannot be improved on. And the Board of Health and the Select Board, through the public hearing process, could certainly, between now and next annual town meeting, enact some regulations to address a lot of the concerns that have been expressed through this process.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think where my ultimate bottom line going through this whole process is, one thing we consistently heard after the short-term rental work group articles were defeated was that I was on it, was on a good track, and that was a good starting place. And I think that this article is fairly similar to that. And it does one thing particular that has been, let's just say, controversial, and that's the zoning piece and the why in the use chart and all that. This new definition, which was a compromise formed out of all 6 meetings and 12 hours on this, to essentially, well, we were advised at length that the term accessory, and this was by the planning director, by the chair of the planning board, by town council, that the term accessory has a very distinct legal, John, please correct me if I say anything off, very distinct legal definition. And that by putting accessory in the use chart would be very legally dubious and not possible. But this compromise around the Nantucket vacation rental, and yes, it has a Y in the use chart, but it is fully dependent on what's in 13938 or the code. And it's essentially, as I said when we were coming to the end of these deliberations, my opinion, and I think the group agreed with it, that this was essentially accessory zoning, but defined in a legal, doable way. So I think that the group worked really hard, and those who out of the six came to an agreement on that. I think that is a good compromise. And then what's in the code here, we'll see what town meeting thinks. And this is ultimately, it's of course, up to the voters and those on town meeting floor to see how they best want to regulate short-term rentals moving forward. And as John said, the Article 60 process for the general bylaw continues with the Attorney General. We wouldn't want to send conflicting language up to be rendered a judgment on that. And there can be time for additional Board of Health regulations for further changes to that. So for going through the process, I support putting this article on the warrant as is, unless my colleagues feel differently or have any specific changes, based on that largely the six citizen warrant articles petitioners did agree to many of the provisions. And of course, the one group can decide that they want to move forward their article. That is, of course, their right. But we did come to a lot of consensus getting this article together for us to consider putting on the warrant. And I appreciate all their time in doing that with us.
Sarah Alger has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Sarah? For those who don't know, Sarah Alger is our moderator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a lot to say, but I just wanted to offer in response to your question about process. If you ever want to have me come to a meeting and go through like in 10 minutes what the process is at town meeting on an article and then a motion and what a main motion is and how those get amended and who can do what and who gets to talk and all that stuff. Or if you want me to have my own special separate meeting, I'm happy to do that. So just let me know. I can talk on it at length at pretty much extemporaneously at any point. So
That is a fabulous idea, Madam Moderator. I think doing it on a Wednesday night, sometime between now and special town meeting, is a grand idea, and we will work on scheduling with you.
Okay, just let me know. I'm around. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Matt?
Yeah, just, I support putting this article forward. I think that, in which order, I kind of think in a way, there's 2 or 3 articles are similar, and putting Nantucket neighbors first is different. And they withheld putting their names in. So in fairness, I wouldn't mind seeing them first if the board felt to do that. But then I think the consensus article should go second, and you could flip a coin on the Cohen or the Sanders article. I think that would be fine, but that's up to the board. I support this article. I do think that getting to 2/3 is going to be difficult. I think people have made a lot of concessions and changes, but I still think that if we cannot be civil with each other, and if people are going to, sort of take pot shots at each other and go to town meeting like we did before, I think either side or the other, I don't think it passes. And I think one side or the other could, or one of the 3 sides, 4 sides could be very disappointed. So I do think, that is still a distinct possibility. I worry we can't control who's going to, gonna ask for, call which article. We can hope, and we can hope that they don't call them, and we can hope that this happens, but once we get to town meeting, we all know that that has a mind of its own. So, I think for this to be successful, I think that there's a big role still for the planning board. I think that there's, I'm gun shy about, we tried to run a process for 3 or 4 meetings last time and correct some things on the last article, and I saw how poorly that went, so I'm hesitant to do that here tonight. I don't think, I think that'd be a mistake. But I do think if in the course of their hearings at the planning board, it doesn't do what it intends, what the group intended, I think it should be changed slightly. If there's ways that can simplify it, if there's ways that they can address some of these concerns so that we actually get to 2/3, I think that, I suggest, I would encourage them to do that, because I think a lot of the concerns are valid. And, so I'm a little less worried about, I don't know how to define what's technical and what's substantive. In my mind, I think, what we need to do, pick a word, is put together something that, that both sides, all the different sides don't like, but that will pass. And so I think that's going to be pulling people from, who are now polarized at different sides, even a little closer. And I think we have to do that with, I hope that we can do that as a community with, with this process. I think if we try to, bulldog it through, one side or the other is going to torpedo this, and we're going to be right back where we were. And so I think it's really important that the demeanor and the, how this plays out over the last, over the next few public meetings, I think is going to be crucial to the success of this. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'm going to let Dave Iverson speak since he sat in on the meetings. He may have a planning board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Dave, stick to process rather than content.
100%. I just want to jump on what Sarah offered, and I think it would be amazing if Sarah could come to one of our planning board public meetings on these, public hearings on these, just so that the public understands what changes can be made and what changes can't. And I think it would be very helpful, and I just want to thank Sarah for offering it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Okay. I disagree with Matt about changing the order of the articles. I think that if we're going to put an article forward, that it should come first. I think it is an honest attempt at consensus, and I think it should be the first thing that town meeting considers. That's my opinion. And having said that, I'll ask if the board needs more information, or are we ready to adopt the warrant in its current order? Where do we want to go?
I think it's time for the people to decide, so let's get the warrants on the...
Yeah, I'll defend my suggestion. One of my concerns, if we put, is people are going to be waiting to vote for that article. They'll vote down ours, they might vote down another, we won't get 2/3, and then we'll, so that my thought on this is to give the consensus article a chance too. But, so that's, I'm looking at it from strategically from a political standpoint of, people are going to come there for one side or another of this, and they're going to wait till they get a chance. I think maybe we want to clear it and find that it doesn't have 2/3 either way, and then maybe people will be ready to accept something more in the middle. But
I am loath to pick one over the other of the citizen-sponsored articles. I think by ordering it any differently, we're picking and choosing, and so.
And when I put them in, I literally just put them in the order I think that they arrived in the town clerk's office.
Okay.
They weren't in any particular order.
Okay. Thanks for that, Erica. That's helpful. Okay, the pleasure of the board, the four of us.
Madam Chair, may I ask you a question about, to Matt about, let Dawn go, please.
Oh, Dawn.
My understanding is I'm allowed to vote to adopt the warrant. I wasn't participating in the discussion on the short-term rental articles, but I can
Right.
vote to adopt the warrant.
Yes, that is true.
That's correct.
There will be 5 of us voting. Just wanted to.
Yes, I'm sorry, Don. Thank you for correcting me. Okay. Erica?
Sorry, before you end up voting on the warrant, there were a couple of comments. And I think it was just for the select board sponsored zoning article. Is it going to be select board only?
Yes,
Not for the planning board?
because the planning board hasn't
Even talked about
discussed
this?
it yet. So
Okay, just making sure.
Yep,
I wanna
Libby and I
address
talked about that before the meeting. so.
Perfect.
Okay, so here we are. Pleasure?
Madam Chair, just a quick question through you to Matt. So we don't know if the other citizen warrant articles petitioners will accept a negative recommendation because they support this. So that would only leave one article. And I'm kind of sympathetic to what Matt's saying, to let the community vote on that one first. So I would just put the PNF article first and then the compromise second.
Okay. I need a motion.
No, I'll move to put that one first.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. I made my perspective clear.
Madam Chair, it's, the strategy and the politics is just too complex for my head, so I will kind of go with the flow, and I will support these two gentlemen.
I'm sorry, you'll support what?
The concept of putting
Charity
charities
first?
First, unless she would stand up and object to it.
Does someone from that group?
I believe in it also for fairness. We asked them to please hold off and not put their signatures in and work the process, and they did that. And they acted in good faith, and they didn't put their signatures in, and they do it. So I think that they could have, and we would have been required in 45 days to hold the town meeting. Now, I think that would have been a mistake on their part. I don't think it would have passed if that had happened. People would have been too angry. And I'm not sure that, who knows what is going to pass this time. But I think, so I look at it from a fairness perspective as well. So,
And Matt, to answer the question, is that something you would oppose as a group? That's the only question I think that's being asked.
I don't, to be honest, I don't think that it necessarily matters, because I think you're gonna find quite a bit of objection to this article on either side. And so people are gonna stick around and vote no. If, Madam Chair, may I propose a process for a separate process that we've been discussing as well to you very quickly, that we shelf all of the STR articles till the May town meeting, and then we continue these negotiations, because I think that there is compromise here, and I think we can meet and compromise as well. And I hate to recommend that, but I think that we are very close, but 12 hours unfortunately was not enough. And I think that we could wrap up a general bylaw, including a zoning bylaw, all into one, if the other groups agreed, and shelf everything STR and go into the May town meeting with a solid article supported by all 3 of these groups that we know would pass easily at town meeting.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the direction this is going. I don't think that was the intention of the meeting tonight, but I appreciate your comments. I would, given that they've been made, I will give the other groups an opportunity to respond to that since it's out there. And then.
Sure, I absolutely think we should be moving forward for a couple of reasons. One is there's still the planning board and the FinCom process to further develop. I do agree with Matt's comment that although we spent a lot of time on this, it could use a little more time in the oven, But we have that in the planning board and FinCom process, and hopefully we can do a little more refining. This is, we're not locked in with tonight. And there's also, amendments on the floor, which I don't prefer, but at least there is a hearing process. Also, there's so much divisiveness in the community, and there's so much uncertainty, and there's such a burden, financial and otherwise, people suing people. I think getting an answer in September is what our community deserves, not an answer in May if we could do it. And I frankly think 0 of the articles, citizen articles, including the one I sponsored, have any chance of getting a 2/3 vote. I think that a consensus article is the only one that's going to get a 2/3 vote. So I don't really care what order they're in. I think that we should be moving forward at the September town meeting. Thank you.
Grant?
I stood up at town meeting and I promised that I would put my talents to work to get something passed. And we have to do it in September. We just have to. We can't go through another town meeting with this hanging over our heads. This needs to get into zoning. We need to get it passed, and I'm going to kill myself trying to get it passed because I need my life back, okay? And everybody else needs their life back. Everybody who has a short-term rental needs certainty in their ability to write a contract. Everybody who lives on this island needs to understand what the future of this island looks like. So let's get this done.
Okay. Thanks, Grant. John, Town Council?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, Madam Chair, that there's really no mechanism to remove these articles from the warrant unless we had the signatures of every single person who signed each of the petitions. And that's not going to happen tonight. Second of all, I would be concerned from a legal standpoint, delaying a decision at town meeting for another 8 months. I don't know how well that would sit with Judge VIII and the land court. And I don't think we want to sort of test the limits of the court's patience here, because this is on remand. I suppose the ZBA is going to make a decision well in advance of next May, but still, the sooner you get this resolved, the sooner you resolve the zoning question, I think that inures to every voter's benefit in town.
Okay. So thanks. I have a motion to reorder the articles and put the PNF article first with the compromise article second. Any further comment on that question? Matt?
If putting Nantucket neighbors first doesn't want to be first and it doesn't really matter, then we can keep them the way they are. I just, I'm fine with that too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would, Madam Chair, I'd like to hear what.
Well, they just, Matt just spoke for them.
Yeah, okay.
I will say, I think what I do think that Matt said that is a positive, and he's right, is that I was very impressed, even though people had difference of opinion, I was very impressed that everyone was working, trying to find a solution, and I hope that continues. I hope that continues through this process and through, to town meeting, because I think that's the only way that we get to somewhere. We get to something that gets 2/3. So I hope that, this isn't like, drawing a line and we're done. I think, how do we get this, and address some of the concerns if possible. So,
Okay.
thank you.
So are you withdrawing your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so now I'm looking for a motion to adopt the warrant in the original order as presented to us.
So
I think
moved.
that's where we're at.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Matt Fee?
Aye.
Tom Dixon?
Aye.
Don Holgate?
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So we have a warrant on to planning and FinCom.
Madam Chair?
Oh, John, is your hand, I thought your hand was still up. Go ahead.
I wanted to just remind the board that you should also take a vote tonight to refer all of the zoning articles on the warrant to the planning board for a public hearing and a report and recommendation.
Oh, thank you for that. Do I have that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Madam
Okay, by roll call, Tom?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Chair. Yes.
Matt?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And I really want to express my appreciation for the time expended by the proponents of the articles, by my colleagues on the board, and by the community who submitted lots of emails, showed up for public comment last week. And it is my strongest desire that the community can come to a 2/3 vote to get this thing, a version of this for us to work from and live with, live into, and see how it goes. Okay, so thank you. Anything else in committee reports? Okay, last up is a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, by roll call, Matt?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thanks, everybody. You got stuff to